So this is our new exhibition, Penn in the World, 12 Decades at the University of Pennsylvania Museum. This was an exhibition that was put together by a group of students in a Halpern-Rogath Curatorial Seminar that I taught with Professor David Brownlee in the Department of Art History about a year and a half ago. And there were 9 students in the class, and they did all the research. They selected the objects, we identified themes, organization. The exhibition really completely comes out of that class. So it really is very much the students' work. They were definitely our source of ideas, source of research, source of inspiration, source of enthusiasm. It was a mixture of graduate and undergraduate students, and all of them knew the museum, but they came to know it much, much better by the archival research that they did to generate the material that's in the exhibition. After that, I continued to work on it, sort of refining some themes, choosing specific objects. They had often chosen types of objects. So in that sense, it's also the product of the museum itself, because there were so many people who helped at some stage. So it's the students' work, but it's also really the museum's exhibition too. It's about us, but everybody really helped to put it together. It's organized in sort of 4 areas. As you come in, you're first confronted with this fabulous photograph of the museum just about the time that it opened in December of 1899. The photograph is taken from Franklin Field, which was at that time just wooden stands. Again, this is 1899. And then next to it, we have this model, which is taken from similar vantage point with obviously the newer Franklin Field. And it shows this part of the building that corresponds to the photograph, but it also shows the rest of the building so you can understand what a complicated building this is. So it shows the rotunda, it shows the additions here and here, the academic wing. The model was built for planning for the main wearing wing, for the wing that was added here. Anyway, we thought it was a nice way. It's such a complicated building. And so we thought that people need some kind of reference point as they come in. So then we start to tell the story of the museum by first telling the story of the architecture. So we spent some time talking about the development of the plan, this incredibly ambitious plan that was going to have 3 colossal rotundas. We have one. Just this western part was built in the first campaign, but this was the plan, and they actually stuck to a version of this plan for years, refining it, adding to it, changing things here and there, but the basic plan of the 3 rotundas, the connecting courtyards, was there from the beginning. That rendering shows the style fairly close to the way that it was built, but before they got to that point, they tried out some other styles. So we have something, down here, that's a little bit more Spanish, I guess, sort of loosely Mediterranean. Those are 2 really splendid watercolors. Most of the architectural drawings are on loan from the architectural archives at Penn. Not all of them, but that particular pair is. Then they kept sort of working on this, and they came up with this sort of heroic design. And they were trying to refine the plan, but again, from the very beginning, it had these 3 rotundas. Now they take different forms, obviously, in the connecting courtyards and so on, but that was the original idea. This is one of my favorites. There were 3 architectural firms involved: Wilson Eyre, Frank Miles Day, and Cope and Stewardson, all on the architecture faculty at Penn. This is a pastel by Wilson Eyre that shows the western courtyard and the rotunda. It's a lovely drawing, and it's just a real pleasure to have. There are actually copies of it all over the building, but it's nice to have the original here. Having just built that one courtyard, it was time to move on to the next phase. and that was to build the rotunda. And this drawing is actually a photograph with pencil additions. So he just sketched the Pantheon, the rotunda on it, and then sent it to, I guess to Harrison at that point, who was in charge really of the building program at that time. So this is what it should look like. And then this talks about the rotunda. We have hundreds of blueprints, but we recognize that not everybody is interested in looking at blueprints. So this is one of the nicest ones, with some quite lovely detailing, and shows the Chinese rotunda as it sits on top of the Harrison Auditorium, and how there's no intervening columns or structure. Clearly they had an idea that maybe it needed some chandeliers, so they sketched those in orange. And this is one of my favorites. We have a lovely series of photographs done by Charles Sheeler, the photographer and 20th century American painter. And this one is looking into the rotunda just about the time it was finished, when it was fitted out with these cases that had Asian, mostly Chinese ceramics. They were on loan, and the hope was that people would buy them for the collection. So they're out there looking like they belong. Again, this is the master plan reinterpreted in the about 1921, again by Wilson Eyre. And you can see it's still the same three rotundas, but now this part has been built here, and they're now working on planning for the next phase. But it's still the basic idea, and this is 25 years later that they still have the same plan. This couple of drawings here then shows the building being continued. Here the addition of the coxswain were Upper and Lower Egypt. And this is a nice drawing because only a few years later the wing was built out here, so you really don't see the coxswain very much. And this drawing here, which relates to a letter that's over on the desk, this is the main entrance, so what's now the Stoner Courtyard. So when they were building this wing, they were still planning to build a rotunda behind it, and that would be the big rotunda on the central axis where the library is now. And there was all kinds of discussion with the then director, George Gordon, who had very strong opinions about pretty much everything. And there's some correspondence back and forth about what this was to look like. They wanted it to be a sort of porch, so you could walk in, you know, be out of the weather, and he didn't want that at all. He wanted you to plunge right into the museum. So, so there's some back and forth about this. This is not how it's built. He prevailed in the end, as the client usually does. And then finally here, the academic wing that was built in the late 60s, early 70s by the firm of Mitchell Jurgala. These are two drawings by Romualdo Jurgala. And he has this wonderful drawing style and sort of whimsical. So you can see here, and this just looks so much of its period, but this is looking through the courtyard from what's now the Mosaic Gallery, when they were still trying to figure out, you know, what these were, just designs, trying to figure out how to build a building and how they wanted it to look. So that was originally to be the cafe, so we have this little cafe with your carafe of wine, which is completely charming sort of view of things. And this one that shows them working out the inner courtyard arrangement between the two parts of the old building. So I love these, and I'm very glad to get these over here. All right, and then one of the things that everybody loves is the Wedgwood plate. It was produced by Wedgwood in 1929. It's one of a set of 12 that show important Penn buildings. And the museum is right there in the middle, and then around it are little vignettes of earlier Penn buildings when it was in Center City, so before it moved to West Philadelphia. So we passed then from, we've now sort of built the building, and I hope have acquainted people with the structure. And now we want to come in and see what sort of goes on inside this building. So the first thing that you come into this section that we call Inside the Museum. And it focuses on a number of different activities, some obvious ones like exhibition design, for example. So there's a panel that talks about exhibition design. There's a panel that talks about some of our most prominent early donors. Eckley Britton Cox, who was a great supporter of our Egyptian work, Phoebe Apperson Hearst, William Randolph Hearst, the newspaper man's mother, and John Wanamaker, a local department store magnate. I think he counts as a magnate. Then over here, we wanted to talk a little bit about material in the collection. Much of the material in our collection comes from our own expeditions, and they're highlighted in the next part of the gallery. But there are some parts of the collection, important parts, that came from other sources, from donors and from dealers. So this highlights, in this case here too, highlights the work of two people. The gem collection of Maxwell Somerville, and this gem here shows up in his photograph right there. And then much of our Chinese material is from the very important dealer in Chinese art, Qingzai Lu, C.T. Lu, and here you see him in, I think about 1950. Most of our dealings with Lu were much, much earlier. He was a very important dealer of Chinese art and really brought Chinese art into collections in the early 20th century, in the teens and 20s. And he had a quite close relationship with George Byron Gordon, who was director here at the time. And he was always sending him letters and telling him about things that he had that we might be interested in. And he also was always sending him postcards just to let him know, just sort of greetings, hi, I hope you're well, sort of thing. So here's one from Seattle. He's been in the United States, he's heading back to China. He was also based in Paris, so this one is from a French steamliner, I think. This is one of my favorites because he says at the end, so he's talking about objects that he had mentioned as possibly of interest to us, but he ends by saying, so this is a postcard that is the Temple of Heaven in Beijing, and he ends by saying, again, these were they were good friends, there was a real friendship between them. So how would you compare this hall to that of Dr. Harrison? And of course, that's the rotunda, which had just opened. This is 1917, so it had just opened really the year or so before. So again, these sort of charming examples of the kind of relationship they had. This is one of the letters that he sent to Gordon where he talks about special prices and regular prices, and we got special prices. There are many, many letters like this. And this is an interesting one because it shows, I think, his broader activities. He's traveling with another dealer, a Mr. Pang, I believe, yes. But he also mentions meeting Charles Freer, who of course gave the Freer collection to the Smithsonian, and also mentions actually a curator at the Field Museum in Chicago. So he was dealing with all kinds of people, not just with us. So they may also have letters that talk about special prices and general prices. That was, I guess, his way of working. And that object there, this guardian figure, is one of the pieces actually that he gave to us. He sold us pieces, but he also gave us a few pieces. Most of the large pieces in the rotunda came through C.T. Lu. This is about education, and the education of school children, but also adults and older students, was really part of the museum's plan from the very beginning. And you can see up there in the text panel, there's a group of school children visiting the museum in 1912. So we wanted to highlight some of those activities and hope that the text panel would suggest a little bit too that there were non-traditional students. So there's school children, and here's a craft class, but then there are also nurses visiting the Egyptian gallery. This is an art class that's sketching in the African gallery. In the teens and 20s, 30s, I guess, 20s, 30s, the museum had a couple of magazines for children, and one of them was called The Spade, and it was about archaeological discoveries all over the world, not just ours. And our resident artist, Mary Louise Baker, did the artwork for that magazine, and every issue would have a different picture, different title picture. So here's this one with the Egyptian boat, here's this one with Alaskan canoe, and this wonderful one which was from somewhere in the magazine of the chariot race, or half a chariot race. We also had a Roman house model, which was a cardboard model that you could put together, and she did the design for the box that it came in, so that's what it looked like. Things that we wanted to do was we have so much archival information, and of course it was that information that we used to generate the information that's in the text panels, but the archival stuff itself is fascinating. So we decided that we definitely wanted to display it, and the wonderful exhibit designers, Kate Quinn particularly, came up with the idea of creating these desks. There's a desk here and a table in the next gallery to put the archival material on. So instead of having it framed on the wall, so it just looks like just a letter, here it's just enlivens it so much more. So it's just a mixture of all kinds of stuff here. Couple of letters, this one from Clarence Fisher, who's excavating at Memphis. This is one of my favorites. These are household expenses and the payroll from Harriet Boyd Hawes excavations at Gornia. And you can see over there that it lists, bread, wine, fish. And then over here is the payroll. So the men's names are listed here in Greek, of course, and then how much they got paid. But over on the right, there are a few little comments, and one is called no good, and another one was dismissed, no good, and one is called good boy. So there are little additions here. Let's see, this is a letter from Key Marco, excavations in 1895-96 from Frank Hamilton Cushing. This actually is object number 1, which is an axe, actually from New Jersey, but that is the object in the collection that is number 1. So we put that out on the desk. Let's see what else is here. Oh, here actually is a letter from Wilson Eyre, the architect, to George Byron Gordon. A number of these things have to do with Gordon complaining about Gordon wanting to change the appearance of the entrance into the museum. There's several other letters, but that was one of the better ones. And actually, this is Gordon worked in Alaska, and these 3 little drawings are actually little drawings made by Inuit children, and he collected them, and so they're really quite charming little scenes of child life, I guess. Then this is a collection of receipts and a checkbook from Ernest Mackay, the excavator at Chanudaru in what's now Pakistan. And there's a letter here from Mackay. And at the end, he says that he's very sorry that this isn't such a good letter because his ribbon is a little stodgy and he needs to get a new one. So we actually have 2 receipts for his typewriter repair. And so we included them. This is his checkbook where he kept the excavation accounts. He also mentions in that letter, and this is one of the things about the art that really brings the archival stuff to life. He's talking about his publication, he's complaining about his typewriter ribbon, but then he also mentions the events before the abdication of King Edward VIII in Britain, because he was back home in Britain in the 1930s. And this letter from Clarence Fisher actually mentions the sinking of the Lusitania. So even though these were archaeologists off in the field, well, technically Mackay was in England, but they still were, part of the world, and world events had a significance for them as well. And then we'll do what in the world. I don't know how you want to do what in the world. Okay. The next part of the exhibition talks about our expeditions, and we wanted to give people a sense of, they're in the museum and they're looking at a case, but they can look from that into the expeditions section, and then from the expeditions look back inside the museum. So we had a couple of spectacular things here. This is a pangolin scaly anteater fighting jacket from Borneo, and this is a matching hat. This is also from Borneo, a basket. And this photograph here actually shows the Borneo Gallery as it was installed in 1899. So when the museum opened, you can see some bits and pieces of the gallery here. And actually this photograph appears elsewhere. But we thought it gave you a sense of what the museum was like in the 1890s. Then over here are four pieces from Alaska, actually from George Gordon's work in Alaska. So this gives you a sort of view into expeditions, and then from there you'll get a view back into here. So you come in here, and the first thing you see as you come into expeditions is this fabulous photograph of the excavations at Nippur in Iraq. That was our first excavation, beginning in, well, they started in 1887, but they didn't actually start excavating until 1888, and it was a very short season. But they continued excavating there up until, in the 80s and the 90s. So this photograph, it's a famous photograph of Nippur, and it sort of sets the scene for expeditions. Then as you move away, I guess you really have to stop and look at the Apalai headdress. This case is devoted to the objects from the expeditions of William Curtis Farrabee. He was in many parts of South America, particularly Amazonian areas. He was also in Peru. And this is a headdress from the Apalai people. It's a shaman's headdress, and we wanted just a real showstopper right here. The pangolin skin fighting jacket is also a showstopper, but this really is a spectacular piece. And there's a photograph actually here on the text panel that shows it being worn. So it really was quite a thing. It was quite a thing. These two objects are also Farrabee. They are from Nazca in Peru. And they have these just wonderful little faces. This is a fisherman, and you can see he's got two fish. He's also got his nets. He's all set. And they just have wonderful little faces. We tried to choose objects that we thought would be engaging looking. They illustrate the expeditions, but we were interested in things that would sort of say something without, you'd know something about the context, of course, by reading the text panel. But even if you didn't, you could still appreciate, everybody laughs at these. Those little faces are just they're just irrepressible. So here again you see Alaska and Borneo from this side. Before you get there, you have to take a brief look at Nippur, again our earliest excavation, and it is that excavation which produced our cuneiform tablets. And 3 of those are mounted there, and there are also a series of cylinder seals. And these 2 pieces, this is an impression made in wax, we wouldn't do that now, of a cylinder seal. And this is a squeeze made of an inscription. A squeeze is made of special paper that is wet and then sort of pounded into the inscription. But it makes a full-scale, good copy, so if, as in the case of this, the inscription's on a very large piece of marble, this way you can take your squeeze up to your office or wherever, or bring it home from the field without having to worry about bringing large pieces of marble with you. We have a wonderful collection of archaeological textiles from Max Uhle's excavations at Pachacamac. So that was something that we very much wanted to focus on. And so there are 3 textile pieces there. Again, this is archaeological material. It's very dry there, so the material survived. And then down here, somewhat later, a weaver's box of spindles and material, somebody who might have produced something similar to those textiles. He also, Max Uhle, and this was in the 1890s, he also just kept specimens of things. And so this was corn, that was ears of corn found in an archaeological context. And he just put them in a jar and sealed it all up. So we thought that was pretty cute. That's the way he sent things back. So there it is, ears of corn. Here's another one of these collections of archival material, very much like the desk. And this one, we were trying, that was really supposed to be sort of the directors. This is more, I think, we thought it a little bit more as an active sort of researcher, although it's from different periods and so on. So here in the middle, we have a few of those small finds from Chanudaro. Oh, this is a list of finds from Key Marco. He just used a tablet that was readily available, so American Beauties. Unfortunately, it's really terrible paper. Oh, this is rather fun. Max Uhle was, again, he was in Peru and elsewhere in South America, and they had a lot of trouble corresponding. So we have this cable from Uhle to Mrs. Stevenson and Dr. Pepper. Your letter lost, Uhle. So she had sent him some important letter that he never got. And then we thought this envelope was cute. This is sent to Mrs. Stevenson, who was one of the important figures in the museum in the 1890s. And that's her address on 21st Street. But she went to the Bryn Mawr Hotel for the summer. So it had to be forwarded to her. And the Bryn Mawr Hotel is the Baldwin School.
Oh, okay.
So that was a place, it seems kind of funny that today that we would go to Bryn Mawr to spend the summer, but that's what she did. This is the firearm permit for John Punnett Peters, who was one of the excavators at Nippur. So it describes, it gives him permission to carry a firearm. And it turned out that he needed it. It was Iraq, Nippur was really on the edges of the Ottoman Empire, and there was a fair amount of disruption between the ruling Turks and the local populations. So, and then the poor archaeologists were sort of caught in the middle. In any case, so you needed a firearm permit. This huge thing here is John Punnett Peters' passport, and you can see that it doesn't have a photograph on it. So I don't know if you can read right there, but it actually describes the shape of his face, how big his nose is, what his eyes are. So I guess you were supposed to sort of put together an image of him based on the description. Yeah, what does it
Light
say?
hair, fair complexion,
Yes.
round chin,
Yes,
medium
right.
mouth, gray eyes, high forehead. Obviously, he's intelligent.
And let's see. Talked about that. Oh, and this is actually another letter. That's from Peters to Hermann Hilprecht, who was also on the expedition to Nippur. And he's sending him a little rubbing and a squeeze to see if he can identify them as he's trying to sort of sort through the materials. Since we're going to do everything, we might as well do this case too. This case has a little bit of everything. It has some archaeological material here. This Raiton from Gournia, from the Bronze Age town on the island of Crete. And then these two pieces, which are from Memphis. The one down here on the bottom is a little faience amulet of Bess, and that's the mold that he was made in. And then this little head is probably a sculptor's model because it has grid lines on the back. It's either a votive head or again, it might well be a sculptor's model with the grid lines on the back to aid the artist. These two pieces are from the Lenape people, and Frank Speck, who was an anthropologist here, spent a lot of time with the Lenape and with the Native Americans of northeastern America. Some of them still in the Northeast, but many of them actually had already been removed to Oklahoma. So this headdress made of otter skin is a Lenape piece, and this wonderful, wonderful wooden bowl, also Lenape. Clarence Fisher, who was the excavator at Memphis, never really published his finds from Memphis, and that includes the palace of Merenptah, which is in the Lower Egyptian Gallery. But he did produce this fabulous series of watercolors, so maybe, and most archaeologists could not do that now, I suppose. But it is too bad that he and Gordon had a kind of a falling out, and so in the end the material wasn't completely published. But he had this wonderful series of watercolors of these architectural elements, which again are in Lower Egypt. Okay, this is one of my favorites. We can't walk by the red hat. This is a wool hat made by the Penobscot people of Maine, and George Gordon purchased it for us when he was director, and he often did this. If he saw something that he thought we should have, we didn't have the funds to purchase it, he would purchase it for us and then would later sell it back to us, or reimburse himself, I suppose, at the original cost. So this was one of those pieces. Gordon was very interested in building up the collection, both through expeditions, but also in other ways as the contact with C.T. Lew. So this was one of the ways that he made up for the fact that we didn't always have the money that we would like to be able to purchase something. Here, another set of our expeditions, objects from expeditions. These three wooden objects here, the headdress and the wonderful dog, are from Henry Usher Hall's ethnographic expedition to the area around Sherbro Island in Sierra Leone in the 1930s. And this little dog shows up in a couple of places. Over on the text panel, there's a photograph of him with his wood carver, because Hall collected not only objects, but he was interested in how these objects were used. So he took a lot of photographs showing them in use, and so we have a picture of little doggy with his wood carver, and he's over in the text panel there. This is, we're jumping around a little bit here. This is a wonderful Maya vase from the site of Chama. We have a very impressive collection of these, which were excavated by Robert Burkett. Other museums have Chama vases, but we have ones which are actually from excavation. So, and we put in here actually this little drawing that Burkett did of Chama and a letter that he wrote to Gordon talking about his discoveries at Chama. So again, we tried to bring the archival material sort of to life and try to associate it also with objects. Over here is one of the pieces from Frank Hamilton Cushing's expedition to Key Marco in southwestern Florida. And that was a site which was right along the shore in very marshy, sort of mucky areas, you know, not just mud, but decayed vegetable matter, kind of lovely place to excavate. Anyway, but the damp kept these wooden objects pristine. This is the head of a little deer with its little ears. It originally was painted and much of that paint disappeared once it was exposed to the air. But when these things were excavated and the objects were excavated in the 1890s, people had no idea what date they were, because they were just these incredible examples of naturalism. There were masks, all kinds, just Cushing uncovered hundreds and hundreds of artifacts. And again, it was from a period not at all understood, and so it was a great splash at the time of the discovery. And we have a number of them here. Let's see. The museum has a number of artists who worked on expeditions or worked for the museum, and we wanted to highlight some of that. So here is a collection of work by some of these museum artists. This one here actually are those masks from Key Marco, and this is by Wells Sawyer, and again he painted these watercolors right after the material was excavated, so they still preserve their original shape because sometimes they got twisted, and also the original paint. He also did the drawing there to show the landscape around Key Marco. This is another work by Mary Louise Baker, who did this wonderful series of drawings of our Maya vases for publication.